The single mother, when visiting her new boyfriend's house, is shocked to find her missing son's favorite toy, and when she decides to investigate, she discovers something terrible. Samantha never thought she would meet someone like Ryan. After years devoted solely to raising her son Alex, the idea of romance seemed distant, almost unreal. But Ryan entered her life like a ray of sunshine after a long storm. He was charming in a genuine way, without exaggeration or empty promises. At first, Samantha kept things light, hesitant to allow herself to feel again, but as days passed, his presence became a comforting constant, and she couldn't help but smile when she thought of him. With every meeting, Ryan proved to be attentive, with an incredible ability to listen and understand the challenges Samantha faced as a single mother. He made her feel seen, something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Their dinners were always simple but with a special touch: soft music in the background, flickering candlelight, and conversations that flowed naturally. Ryan had the gift of turning each moment into something unforgettable, and Samantha began to feel a hope rise in her chest, something that had long been dormant. He was also a natural storyteller, and his eyes sparkled when he talked about his travels and experiences around the world. Samantha found herself increasingly involved, as if living something that only existed in the books she read. One evening, while they drank wine under the starry sky on Ryan's porch, he surprised her with a question that made her realize the depth of their relationship. "What do you most wish for in the future, Sam?" That question caught her off guard. The last person to ask about her dreams had been herself, and that was many years ago. Ryan made her remember who she was beyond being a mother. The way he treated Samantha with kindness and respect slowly made her lower her defenses. She had always been cautious, protective of her feelings, but with Ryan, everything seemed different. He was secure without being controlling, affectionate without being suffocating. More importantly, he genuinely seemed interested not only in her but in understanding the dynamic between mother and son, something that deeply touched Samantha. Once, while they walked through a park together, Samantha glanced at Ryan's profile under the golden light of the late afternoon. He smiled in a way that made her heart race. "You know, Ryan, it's been a long time since I felt like this," she confessed, the words slipping out before she could stop them. He looked at her tenderly and said, "You deserve to feel this way always, Sam. Every day with you makes me want to be a better person." It was in that moment that she realized she was falling in love, perhaps for the first time truly. At the end of each day, when Alex was already asleep and the house grew quiet, Samantha thought of Ryan. He wasn't perfect, she knew that, but he was everything she had never known she needed. The months of loneliness and struggle to support her small family now seemed lighter with his presence. Slowly, she allowed herself to dream of a different future. A future where, for the first time, she was not alone. In the beginning, Samantha was hesitant to introduce Ryan to Alex. Being a single mother had taught her to protect her son from any hurt, and the fear that Ryan might not connect with him loomed in her mind. But when the time came, something surprising happened. Ryan knelt to be at eye level with Alex with a sincere and gentle smile and asked, "Hey champ, what do you like to do in your free time?" It was a simple question, but it broke the ice. Alex's eyes lit up with curiosity, and within minutes, the two were chatting like old friends. Their first interactions were filled with small discoveries. Ryan always showed interest in what Alex had to say, not just with the casual enthusiasm of an adult trying to impress a child. He genuinely wanted to know who Alex's favorite superhero was, which cartoon he liked most, and especially what made him happy. For Samantha, it was a relief to see her son's smile grow whenever Ryan was around. Gradually, her heart settled, realizing how naturally and affectionately Ryan was with Alex. One time, while they watched a movie in the living room, Alex began playing with his toy cars on the floor. Without hesitation, Ryan joined him, creating a small racetrack with cushions. Samantha watched the two with a mixture of surprise and joy. Ryan wasn't just trying to win Alex over to score points with her. He genuinely seemed to enjoy spending time with the boy. The living room, once marked by the quiet life of just mother and son, was now filled with laughter and the sounds of imaginary engines speeding down the hallway. One of Samantha's fondest memories was when Ryan took Alex to a football game. Alex, who had always been a bit shy, was excited by the idea. Ryan bought him a jersey of his favorite team, and together they cheered as if nothing else in the world mattered. When they returned home that night, Alex ran to his mother, barely able to contain his excitement. "Mommy, Ryan taught me the perfect kick." He spoke about Ryan with such enthusiasm that Samantha could barely hide the happiness in her eyes. As days passed, Ryan began visiting Samantha's house more frequently. On Saturdays, he and Alex would make pancakes together, creating a sort of tradition between them. Ryan let Alex choose the ingredients, and together they made bizarre recipes with chocolate syrup and fruits, filling the house with the sweet aroma of childhood. Alex's joy was palpable, and the sound of his laughter echoed through the kitchen, while Samantha, watching the scene, felt a peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. Besides the fun times, there were also the quiet moments, like when Ryan helped Alex with his homework. With patience and dedication, he sat beside the boy, carefully explaining the math lessons, while Alex listened attentively. That kind of bond was something Samantha feared her son might never experience. But now, seeing Ryan take on that role, her heart grew more trusting in the man who was becoming part of their lives. On a rainy afternoon, while they all sat on the couch watching a movie, Alex, without thinking, rested his head on Ryan's shoulder and fell asleep. For Samantha, that gesture was proof of how deep the bond between the two had become. Ryan wrapped his arm around the sleeping boy, and Samantha, watching them silently, realized that her son, who had always been so reserved, had found someone he could trust in Ryan. It was a perfect spring afternoon. The sky was a clear blue, with a few clouds lazily floating above the heads of those walking through the park. Samantha, Alex, and Ryan were walking across the lush green grass, enjoying the gentle warmth of the sun. Children were running around, flying kites, playing ball, and laughing with the freedom that the sunny day brought. As usual, Alex had his favorite teddy bear with him, an inseparable companion he had carried since he was little. The bear, once beige and now worn out, had a small stitched scar on its arm, made by Samantha after the toy had a tumble some time ago. As Alex ran back and forth, always keeping a firm grip on the bear, Samantha and Ryan strolled more slowly, watching the scene with smiles of satisfaction. Everything seemed to be in perfect harmony. However, amidst the park's bustle, Samantha noticed that Alex suddenly stopped running. His expression changed from pure joy to something closer to panic. He began looking around, his eyes filling with tears even before he could say what had happened. "Mommy, the bear," he shouted, his voice trembling. Samantha immediately understood what was happening. Alex's teddy bear, his inseparable friend, was missing. "Calm down, sweetheart. We'll find it, it's here somewhere," she said, trying to remain calm while feeling her own anxiety start to rise. Alex's eyes, once bright, were now clouded with anguish. Ryan, sensing the seriousness of the situation, joined the search. 3 people searching the crowded park, while Alex held his breath with every step, hoping to spot his lost friend. The park, which moments ago had seemed vibrant and welcoming, now felt vast and intimidating. Samantha, now desperate, looked under benches, behind trees, calling the bear's name as if it could answer. "It's here somewhere, Alex. Don't worry, we'll find it," she said, more to herself than to her son. Time seemed to drag. Each minute that passed without finding the bear made the weight on Samantha's chest grow heavier. She felt the frustration building. How could this have happened so quickly? Alex began to cry softly, clinging to Samantha's legs. "He's gone, Mommy. I'll never see him again." His words broke Samantha's heart. It was just a toy, she knew that. But to Alex, that bear represented security, comfort, and a part of his childhood that still made him feel protected. "Hey, little one, don't give up yet," Ryan tried to calm him, placing a hand on his shoulder. But the atmosphere was already heavy, and the bear's absence seemed to echo in every corner of the park. As the sun began to set, the sky changing to shades of orange and pink, Samantha finally stopped searching. The silence between them was filled with the distant sounds of children still playing, unaware of the small disaster that had occurred. "Maybe someone found it and took it," Ryan suggested, trying to offer an explanation. The boy, his eyes swollen from crying, nodded silently, though deep down he knew the bear would not be coming back. They returned home in uncomfortable silence, the words of comfort not enough to erase the feeling of loss. Alex stared out the car window, his small fingers still making the gesture of holding the bear, as if its absence left a void even in his hands. It was a normal day, and Samantha was excited to spend the afternoon at Ryan's house. The last few weeks had been intense, but the moments with him were like a refuge. Alex was with a friend, so she would take the time to relax, free of responsibilities for a few hours. Ryan greeted her with a warm smile, and after a tight hug, he led her to the living room. Ryan's house always had a cozy atmosphere, with the soft aroma of coffee and the windows open, letting in the gentle breeze of the late afternoon. While Ryan prepared something in the kitchen, Samantha wandered casually around the living room. The coffee table was organized, with a few books stacked and a cup of tea already cooling. Her eyes landed on a shelf she hadn't paid attention to before. There was a wooden box, elegantly decorated, and it was open. Something familiar caught her attention, something small and furry. Her heart stopped for a second. She moved closer, holding her breath, and saw there, without a doubt, Alex's teddy bear. Samantha's hands began to tremble slightly. She picked up the bear, almost unable to believe it. It was impossible. This was the same bear Alex had lost weeks ago in the park. The same bear they had searched for desperately for hours. The same small stitched scar on its arm. Her heart started beating faster, and the room, which had once felt so cozy, now seemed to close in around her. What was that bear doing there? At that moment, the sound of footsteps coming from the kitchen brought her back to reality. She quickly placed the bear back on the shelf and tried to compose herself. Ryan appeared in the doorway with a carefree smile on his face. "Everything okay?" he asked, not noticing the whirlwind of emotions taking over Samantha. She forced a smile and nodded. "Yes, everything's fine," she lied, even though she felt that something was very wrong. The discomfort was palpable. Every fiber of Samantha's body screamed that something was off. She tried to act naturally while Ryan continued talking, but her mind was miles away. How had that bear ended up in Ryan's house? Had he found it in the park? But why hadn't he mentioned it? Questions swirled in her mind, and no answer made sense. She glanced around the room again, trying to find some other clue, some explanation, but nothing seemed out of place, except for that bear. Ryan kept talking, oblivious to the confusion growing inside Samantha. Samantha tried to stay calm. Ryan's smile still seemed so genuine, his voice still so soothing, but something inside her had changed. After seeing Alex's teddy bear on the shelf, nothing seemed right anymore. She knew she couldn't confront him without understanding the situation, so she chose the safest path, pretending she hadn't noticed anything. "The coffee is great, Ryan," she said, forcing a smile as she picked up the cup, her hands still trembling. Inside, her world was in complete disarray, but on the outside she had to keep the mask intact. Every second, the silence between Ryan's words seemed to grow, as if the air around her was becoming denser, heavier. Samantha now looked at everything around her with new eyes. The house, which once seemed welcoming, now seemed to hide secrets. It was then that she began to notice small details that had previously escaped her. An old photo on the shelf, Ryan younger with a woman she had never seen, both smiling. Who was she? Why had Ryan never mentioned her? The feeling that something was out of place only grew. She continued to smile, answering Ryan's questions with monosyllables, but her eyes were restless, scanning every corner of the room. There was something else. A box of toys in one of the rooms, which Ryan said belonged to his nephews who visited from time to time. But Samantha had never heard of these nephews before. It was possible that Ryan was just being disorganized, but every small detail now seemed like a clue, a puzzle she needed to solve. Ryan stepped out to take a call in the yard, and Samantha, left alone for a brief moment, felt her breathing quicken. It was during this short window of time that she noticed something in the corner of the room. A box of papers haphazardly thrown together. This was unusual for Ryan, always so organized. She got up, approached it, trying to keep her steps light. On the surface, there were just some old bills, nothing out of the ordinary, but underneath, she saw documents, papers that seemed to belong to another life, a life Ryan had never mentioned. She barely had time to process it before she heard Ryan coming back. The sound of his footsteps made her quickly retreat, her heart pounding. She closed the box with forced calm and returned to the sofa. He entered the room, still smiling, unaware of the growing unease inside Samantha. But she felt as if she were sitting on a ticking time bomb, and with every passing minute, the tension increased. How had Alex's teddy bear ended up there? And why were there so many things she didn't know about the man she was involved with? Samantha could no longer ignore the doubts that consumed her mind. Weeks had passed since the strange encounter with Alex's teddy bear in Ryan's house, but that image still haunted her. Every time she looked at Ryan, a new question arose. She knew she needed to discover the truth, but doing so without raising suspicion was delicate. Ryan was still affectionate, still acted like the perfect man, but something inside her had already changed. There was a darkness behind that smile, and Samantha was determined to uncover it. It started subtly, by searching social media looking for information about Ryan that he had never mentioned. What began as innocent curiosity soon became a meticulous investigation. Old photos, friends he never talked about, and suddenly, a first surprise. Ryan had lived in several cities over the last few years. Each time she discovered a new city, something inside Samantha twisted. Why had he never mentioned these moves? What was he hiding? The feeling that something was terribly wrong grew with every new discovery. Samantha began to cross-reference the cities Ryan had lived in with news of disappearances. It felt like a punch in the stomach when, during her search, she noticed a disturbing coincidence. In every city where Ryan had lived, children had mysteriously disappeared. Small headlines popped up here and there without much attention, but the pattern was there. The discovery sent a chill through Samantha's entire body. That night she could barely sleep. Every detail she had ignored or minimized throughout the relationship now stood out like a red flag. The nephews he had never mentioned again, Alex's teddy bear, the old documents she had glimpsed in his house. Desperate for more concrete answers, Samantha dug deeper into her investigation. She discovered that, in one of the cities where Ryan had lived, a mother described the last person seen with her missing daughter as a kind man with a comforting smile. The description was vague, but Samantha's anguish intensified. The fact that Ryan never mentioned these life changes, the old photos, and the coldness he now tried to hide, all made her doubt the man who had won her heart. Samantha knew she was getting closer to something terrible, but at the same time she couldn't back away. Every new piece of information she uncovered made her more anxious. She searched old news archives, missing persons forums, and even police records available online. In each one, small details emerged, forming a terrifying pattern. In one city, a girl had disappeared from a park. In another, 2 siblings never came home from school. And Ryan had been in all those cities. Samantha arrived at Ryan's house on a cloudy afternoon, the sky heavy as if reflecting the weight of her thoughts. She had mentally rehearsed how she would act, keeping the facade of a carefree woman, someone who still trusted him. But inside she was falling apart. Ryan's hug, which once made her feel safe, now felt like a trap. His familiar scent was no longer comforting. In fact, it felt suffocating. With every step she took inside that house, something inside her screamed that she was approaching an abyss from which there would be no return. The conversation flowed naturally, but Samantha noticed subtleties in Ryan's behavior that made her uncomfortable. He spoke less, his smiles seemed forced. When she asked innocent questions about the past, he would look away, abruptly changing the subject. There was tension in the air, a stiffness that had never existed before. It was as if he knew something was different about her, that her thoughts were no longer the same. Samantha began to feel that at any moment the mask would fall. As they sat down for coffee, Ryan looked at her with an intensity that gave her goosebumps. The silence between them was strange, heavy. "Are you okay?" he asked, his eyes narrowing as if trying to read her thoughts. "Yes, just a little tired," Samantha lied, struggling to keep her voice steady. She knew he was growing suspicious, and that terrified her. It felt as though she was playing a dangerous game of chess, where every move had to be carefully calculated. Then, during a casual walk around the house, something made her stop. A small, slightly ajar door that she had never noticed before led to an improvised office. Samantha hesitated, feeling a pang of anxiety grow in her chest. Ryan, who always stayed close to her, left her alone for a moment this time. Taking the chance, she stepped into the room. The room was in complete order, except for a pile of disorganized papers on the desk. Something about it drew her in like a magnet. She quickly but carefully flipped through the papers, trying not to leave any trace of her curiosity. It was a mix of documents, some financial, others personal. Nothing unusual at first glance. But then an old envelope with several photographs caught her attention. The name of a city she recognized was scribbled in the corner, a city where, as she had discovered in her investigation, a child had disappeared years ago. The discomfort that had been growing inside Samantha now felt uncontrollable. She knew this was no coincidence. When Ryan returned to the room, she had already put everything back in its place, but her heart was racing. "What were you doing there?" he asked, his voice tinged with suspicion. Samantha forced a smile, trying to appear nonchalant. "Just curious, I had never seen this room before." Ryan watched her for a few seconds, long enough to make her break out in a cold sweat. "You know you can ask me anything, right?" The sentence seemed innocent, but there was something threatening in its subtext, something that made Samantha's stomach turn. Samantha knew she was getting closer to the truth, but what she didn't know yet was just how dark that truth would be. One day, with Ryan away on a business trip, she felt a rare opportunity. Her heart raced as she searched his office again, this time with more calm and focus. It was as if all her suspicions guided her, a primal survival instinct pushing her to continue. Then, at the bottom of a locked drawer that she managed to open with a small hairpin, she found something that froze her blood. Inside the drawer was a thick folder full of old photographs. Photos of children, some smiling, others with a vacant expression. As she turned the photos over, the shock hit her hard. These were the same children from the missing person reports she had found in her investigation. The same children who were never seen again. Some of the photos were worn, as if they had been handled frequently, But the most terrifying detail was that Ryan appeared in some of them in the background almost like a shadow. Always present, always nearby. Samantha felt bile rise in her throat but forced herself to continue. There were more documents in the drawer, papers with names, addresses, dates. Each time she flipped through another document, the network that Ryan had woven became clearer and more terrifying. This was no coincidence. The connections were meticulous, and the level of organization was almost inhuman. He wasn't just involved in these disappearances, he seemed to be a central link in something much bigger. A child abduction ring that spanned several cities. Samantha's fingers trembled as she read a report that described a specific child, including disturbing details about the last days of her life. It was as if the document was Ryan's personal file, each detail recorded with cold precision. She tried to stay focused, but the fear was overwhelming her mind. As she grabbed another document, something caught her attention viscerally. Alex's name was there, along with his photo as a possible next target. Her son, her baby, was in the sights of this monstrous web. The room spun around Samantha, and she had to hold onto the desk to avoid collapsing. How could the man who had so thoroughly won her heart and the trust of her son be capable of something so horrible? With her heart racing, Samantha began taking photos of the documents with her phone, moving quickly but carefully, trying not to make any mistakes. She knew she needed this evidence, but every passing second heightened her fear that Ryan might return before she finished. The sound of each click from the camera seemed deafening in the heavy silence of the house, as if even the walls knew the danger looming. The air was suffocating and every minute felt like an eternity. When she finished photographing all the documents, Samantha stuffed the papers back into the drawer as fast as she could, trying not to leave any trace of her presence. Her mind was in turmoil. The revelation had left her in shock, but reality was harsh. She had no time to hesitate. Samantha felt as if she were standing at the edge of a precipice, her body motionless while the abyss opened before her. The photos, the documents, the revelation that Ryan was involved in the kidnapping of children, everything swirled in her mind like a storm. She wanted to run, grab Alex, and flee as far away as possible, but something held her back. Fear. It wasn't just fear of Ryan but the fear of making the wrong move, of alerting him too soon. She knew that if he discovered she knew the truth, it could be the end, for her and for Alex. In the days following the discovery, Samantha felt paralyzed. Every time Ryan touched her, her skin tingled as if her body rejected the contact. But she had to pretend that nothing had changed, that she was still the same passionate woman she had been before. Internally, however, she was shattered. She thought about every word, every gesture, every look she cast at him. It was a cruel theater, and Samantha felt like she was suffocating in her own role. Every second seemed like a missed opportunity to escape, but doubt held her back. As she watched Alex playing on the living room floor, laughing as if the world were a safe place, Samantha felt an overwhelming anguish. How could she tell him that the man who had become a part of their lives was a monster? Every night, Samantha lay beside Alex, listening to his calm breathing, and repeated the same silent promise, "I will protect you, I swear." But by morning, the paralysis returned, and she found herself once again pretending, smiling, acting. Ryan seemed not to notice, at least not yet. He still smiled, still made plans for the future, still talked about a life together. And that only made everything more terrifying. It was as if he were a predator, camouflaged within his own lies. The idea of confronting him crossed her mind, but she quickly discarded it. Samantha knew Ryan was dangerous. She had seen in the documents the coldness with which he dealt with the disappearances. There was no room for error, no margin for hesitation. One wrong word and everything could collapse. But each minute she spent not acting also felt like a betrayal of her maternal instinct. The internal conflict consumed her, a battle between fear and the urgency to save her son. Ryan seemed the same as always, but Samantha knew something had changed. He now watched her every move more closely, as if he were looking for signs, traces of a truth he was beginning to suspect. The atmosphere in the house became suffocating. Samantha felt his eyes on her all the time, as if he were waiting for the right moment to act, to confront her. Although he still smiled and tried to maintain normality, there was a hidden tension in every interaction between them. Every touch, every word seemed loaded with a danger she could barely name. When Samantha asked about his days or about the past, Ryan would respond with false cordiality, a kind of calculated patience. He smiled, but his eyes didn't follow suit. They were cold, distant, as if he were seeing beyond her, evaluating every question, analyzing every answer she gave. The control he exercised over his own emotions was flawless, and that terrified her even more. It was as if he were already 2 steps ahead, just waiting for her to make a fatal mistake. Alex remained oblivious to the growing tension, playing around the house, unaware that the atmosphere had changed. However, each time Ryan approached him, Samantha felt her heart tighten. Ryan, who once seemed so caring and affectionate, now approached Alex in a way that made her uncomfortable. His gestures were still the same, but there was something different in the way he looked at the boy. Something more possessive, more controlling. Samantha knew Ryan was trying to intimidate her without saying a word. The nights were the worst. The darkness that enveloped the house seemed to amplify the silence and tension. Ryan slept beside her, but Samantha barely managed to close her eyes. She felt his heavy presence next to her, his breathing a constant reminder of the danger he posed. She tossed and turned in bed, trying to appear relaxed, while her thoughts raced toward plans of escape and survival. But Ryan was always alert, and Samantha knew that any suspicious move could trigger a violent reaction. As the days passed, Ryan began asking strange questions disguised as concern. "You've been distracted lately, Sam? Is everything okay?" he asked one afternoon in a tone too soft to be genuine. Samantha swallowed hard, struggling to stay calm. "Yes, I'm just tired. Nothing more." But she knew he didn't believe her. He was playing, testing her limits, looking for cracks in her facade. With each question she felt the net closing in more and more. Ryan's movements around the house had also changed. He seemed more present, more controlled in every step. There were moments when he would simply appear behind her, silently watching what she was doing. "Forgot to tell me where you were going?" he commented casually on one occasion when Samantha went for a short walk. The smile on his face was calm, but the subtext was clear. He was watching her. She felt a shiver run down her spine. He knew something was wrong, and Samantha couldn't afford the slightest slip. The night was heavy, the air dense with the feeling that something irreversible was about to happen. Samantha watched Ryan from the other side of the room, his movements calm and controlled as he organized some papers. Inside, her heart was beating wildly. She knew there was no longer any way to postpone the confrontation. The decision had already been made. It was that night or never. With her phone discreetly hidden in her pocket, she activated the recording. Fear rose in her throat, but she couldn't let it paralyze her. "Ryan," she began, her voice coming out firmer than she had expected. "We need to talk." He looked at her, his cold eyes analyzing her for a moment before smiling. "Sure about what?" Samantha hesitated, feeling the weight of what she was about to say. "It's about Alex's teddy bear," she continued, crossing her arms to disguise the trembling in her hands. Ryan's face remained expressionless, but his eyes darkened for a fraction of a second. "What about the bear?" he asked, his voice too soft, almost melodic, as if he were ready for a game. Samantha took a deep breath. "I found the bear at your house. The one he lost at the park. How do you explain that?" Ryan was silent for a moment. The smile didn't disappear, but there was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. He shrugged as if it were trivial. "I must have found it and forgotten to mention it. I didn't think it was that important." The calmness of his words only fueled Samantha's terror. She knew it wasn't the truth. "Forgot to mention it?" she repeated, her voice now tinged with desperation. Ryan took a step forward, keeping his tone controlled. "Sam, you're tired, overwhelmed. I know things have been hard lately. We can't let a coincidence like this shake everything we've built." He spoke with calculated smoothness, as if trying to convince her of her own insanity. But Samantha was no longer willing to be manipulated. "This isn't a coincidence, Ryan. I know what you did. I know about the children. About the towns. I know everything," she fired, without giving him time to react. Ryan's smile vanished and something dark overtook his face. The room grew cold, the air filled with a threatening silence between them. "Everything?" he murmured, his voice now icy. He took another step forward, approaching her like a predator closing in on its prey. "You don't know anything, Samantha." She felt bile rise in her throat but didn't back down. It was now or never. "I saw the documents, Ryan. The photos. Do you think you can keep hiding this?" Her hand nervously slid into her pocket, where the phone was still recording. For a moment, the silence was unbearable. Ryan looked at her with a mixture of contempt and a disturbing calm. Then finally he spoke, his voice dripping with malice. "You've always been smarter than I expected, Sam, but also very predictable." He let out a low laugh, and the facade he had maintained for so long began to crack. "And now, are you going to run to the police? Think they'll believe you? I control everything. No one will listen to you." Samantha felt the ground crumble beneath her feet, but she didn't show it. "You can't keep hiding who you really are. Not after everything." Ryan watched her for a moment, his gaze relentless. "And what are you going to do, Sam? Run. Try to take me down with your evidence? I've already thought of everything. You have no way out." The threat was clear now, the danger real and tangible. He stepped closer, so close that Samantha could feel his cold breath on her face. "Alex will never be safe away from me." Samantha's heart raced. She knew she needed to get out of there, that this was the moment to act. "You will never touch him again," she said, with all the strength she had left. Ryan's truth was now exposed, and she knew he wouldn't let her escape easily. Ryan took another step forward, ready to strike. "You think you can challenge me?" he whispered, his voice now full of disdain. "I always win, Samantha. Always." But, behind the trembling hand in her pocket, the phone was still recording. And that recording would be her only weapon. Samantha's world seemed to crumble in slow motion, but her mind was already one step ahead. As Ryan approached, darker and more threatening than ever, she felt the phone vibrate discreetly in her pocket. The recording was still there, capturing every word. The truth was in her hands, and she knew she couldn't waste the opportunity. Her heart beat so loudly it seemed to fill the room with the deafening sound of her fear. "I need to get out of here," was the thought that echoed urgently. Without hesitation, she backed toward the door, keeping her eyes fixed on Ryan, not allowing him to see the panic growing inside her. "This won't end well for you, Sam," he said, his voice low and sharp like a whispered warning. But she didn't respond. With her stomach churning, she turned all at once and ran toward Alex's room. Time seemed to work against her, every second precious and yet insufficient. When she opened the door, she found Alex asleep in bed, innocent and unaware of the terror surrounding them. "Come on, darling. We need to go now," she whispered, her voice trembling as she picked up the boy, who woke up confused but didn't resist. As she rushed down the stairs with Alex in her arms, Samantha heard Ryan's footsteps behind her, heavier and more determined. He was only a few meters away. "You're not going anywhere," he shouted, and Samantha's panic intensified. She reached the front door with her heart in her throat and unlocked it with the kind of speed that only deep fear can bring. When she opened the door and felt the cold night air hit her face, adrenaline took over. She ran barefoot, holding Alex close, and the sound of Ryan's footsteps behind her made her blood run cold. The street was deserted, the silence of the night broken only by the frantic sound of her own steps. Samantha ran as fast as she could, but she felt the weight of Alex and the exhaustion building up. Her legs hurt, her chest burned, but there was no other choice. She glanced quickly over her shoulder and saw Ryan leaving the house, his dark figure in the distance but closing in. "Mommy, what's happening?" Alex asked, his voice filled with fear and confusion, but she couldn't stop to explain. "It's okay, darling. Just stay with me." She turned the corner, her heart pounding, trying to remember the right direction to get out of the neighborhood. The street seemed to stretch out like an endless maze, and every alleyway appeared darker and more threatening than the last. Ryan was already running after her, his distant but increasingly closer shouts echoing through the night. The sound of his footsteps reverberated, the danger palpable. She knew that if he caught up with her, there would be no escape. With fierce determination, Samantha clutched Alex tightly to her chest and forced herself to move faster, ignoring the exhaustion and pain. Finally, in the distance, she spotted a car, her only glimmer of hope amidst the terror. "Please, let it be unlocked," she muttered to herself, sprinting toward the vehicle. Her trembling hands grasped the door handle, and miraculously the door opened. She placed Alex in the back seat with desperate speed and rushed to the driver's seat. But just as she was about to start the car, she saw Ryan appearing in the distance, almost reaching her. The terror she felt now was absolute. She turned the key with shaky hands, the seconds stretching into what felt like hours as the engine hesitated to start. Finally, the car roared to life, and she pressed the accelerator with all her strength, pulling away with a silent scream of relief. The headlights briefly illuminated Ryan's face as he tried to catch up with them, but soon the darkness swallowed him. Samantha drove as if her life depended on it, and it did. Her hands were sweaty on the steering wheel, and Alex, still confused, gripped the seatbelt tightly. The sound of the engine was the only thing that filled the void between them, but the silence was loaded with fear. Samantha parked the car in front of the police station, her hands still trembling, her heart racing, and her mind swirling with thoughts. Alex slept in the back seat, exhausted from the escape, unaware of the full extent of the danger they had just left behind. She looked at her son, feeling a lump form in her throat, a mixture of relief and dread. She knew that the worst was not yet over. With the phone still in hand, containing the recording that could destroy Ryan, she took a deep breath. It was time to act. Entering the police station felt like crossing a portal between chaos and safety. Every step Samantha took felt heavy, weighed down by the urgency that pushed her forward, though her body was exhausted, drained of strength by the adrenaline that had coursed through her veins. When she finally reached the counter, her words came out with difficulty, almost cut off by her fatigue. "I need to speak to someone, urgently." The officer who attended to her looked at her with curiosity, sensing the gravity in her expression. Without hesitation, he led her to a private room. What followed was a blur of questions and answers. Samantha told them everything: Ryan's facade, Alex's teddy bear, the photos of the missing children. Each word she spoke seemed to open another wound in her soul, but she knew she had to continue. When she handed over the phone with the recording, she felt her hands tremble. It was like handing over the final piece of a terrible story. The officer pressed play, and as Ryan's voice filled the room, Samantha saw the expressions of the officials shift from skepticism to absolute horror. Hours later, the news arrived. Ryan had been arrested. The authorities found him still at home, apparently calm, as if he had been expecting that moment. When they handcuffed him, his expression was cold, without remorse. Samantha knew then that although he had lost the battle, he never truly believed he would lose. But in that moment it didn't matter. Ryan was in custody. The man who had been her companion, who had infiltrated her son's life, was finally detained, unable to hurt anyone else. Samantha's relief was instant, but it also came with an overwhelming wave of emotions. The shock of everything she had lived through in the past weeks finally hit her. She felt her body give way, the tears flowing silently as the reality sank in. She had fought. She had protected Alex with all her strength and against all odds had managed to escape that nightmare. But at the same time, the weight of what she had discovered about Ryan, the man she thought she knew, was unbearable. When the police investigation deepened, more horrors came to light. Ryan's web of crimes wasn't an isolated case. He was part of something bigger, a network of child abductions that stretched across multiple cities, connecting disappearances that had until then been treated as separate events. Samantha listened to the details with an emptiness in her chest, knowing that although she had managed to save Alex, many other families remained broken by loss. But now, finally, some of those children would be found. The emotional impact of the revelation shook not only Samantha but the entire community. The story exploded in the news, and Ryan's name became synonymous with horror. With every new child freed, with every face reunited with their family, Samantha felt a strange mix of joy and guilt. She had become involved with a monster without knowing it, but she had also been responsible for taking him down. Still, the pain of the other mothers echoed in her heart. She knew that many would never have the same happy ending. Samantha was called to testify several times, each visit to the police station bringing back the trauma she was still processing. The faces of the officers were now familiar, and every time she entered that place she knew it wasn't just about Ryan, it was about every child he had hurt. Months had passed since the nightmare that nearly destroyed Samantha and Alex's lives. The routine, once chaotic and filled with fear, was now beginning to settle into a calmer rhythm, like a scar that, while visible, no longer hurt as much. Samantha still found herself thinking about the past, reliving the moments of horror she had faced, but every time she looked at Alex playing carefree in the yard, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. The storm had passed, and now came the difficult but necessary task of rebuilding. Life had taken on a lighter pace but not without leaving marks. The trauma still haunted her in quiet moments, on dark nights when fear crept in, and she woke up startled. Sometimes, a single unexpected sound was enough to make her heart race, but Samantha now better understood these moments. She had learned to deal with them, facing her fears in small doses, without allowing herself to be consumed by them. The simple fact of being alive, of having saved Alex, was enough to remind her of her strength. She began to rise again little by little, rediscovering who she was outside of Ryan's shadow and the horror he had brought into their lives. She found support in victim support groups, where she shared her story and listened to others that helped her see that, although the scars were deep, healing was possible. In those groups, among other mothers and people who, like her, had faced personal tragedies, Samantha found a sense of belonging and hope. Each story of overcoming inspired her to keep moving forward. Alex, in turn, adapted with the ease typical of children. He didn't fully understand what had happened, but he knew he was safe now. His days were filled with play, laughter, and new friendships at school. For Samantha, seeing the joy return to her son's face was the greatest sign that the path to recovery was being forged. The house, once filled with shadows, now vibrated with the sounds of laughter and animated conversations at dinner. Still, there were moments when Samantha found herself reflecting on the strength she had discovered within herself. She had never imagined she would be able to face someone like Ryan and emerge victorious. But the fear that had paralyzed her so many times had been replaced by fierce determination, a courage she never knew she had. That strength, she now realized, came from the unconditional love for Alex and the instinct to protect him at all costs. It was something that no darkness could destroy. In her moments of reflection, Samantha sometimes wondered how things would have been if she hadn't discovered the truth in time. But she quickly pushed those thoughts aside. What mattered was the present. Therapy, both for her and Alex, had also become an important part of the recovery process. During their weekly sessions, Samantha spoke openly about the ghosts that still haunted her, while Alex, little by little, began to express his own feelings. The therapist was gentle but firm, helping them understand that what they had lived through didn't have to define who they would become. It was a slow process, but with each session, Samantha felt the knots in her mind begin to unravel. Over time, the memories of Ryan began to lose their power. The emotional impact still existed, but it no longer dictated her life. With each new dawn, Samantha felt further removed from the version of herself that had been dominated by fear. There was a future ahead, a new chapter to be written, and she was ready for it. Alex, with his vibrant energy and curious outlook on the world, was living proof that, even in the darkest situations, there was light. There was a path to follow. Samantha looked at the road ahead as she drove, feeling the fresh wind from the open window. The landscape around them slowly changed, exchanging the old city's buildings for green hills and vast fields. Beside her, Alex watched the world go by with curiosity, holding tightly to a new toy he had chosen for this new phase of their lives. Both knew that leaving everything behind wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Samantha felt that, to heal the wounds, they needed a new beginning, far from any reminder that tied them to the dark past. The new town seemed different from the first moment they arrived. The air felt lighter, the streets quieter, and the neighborhood welcoming. The house they had chosen was small but cozy, with a view of the countryside that, somehow, brought Samantha the sense of peace she had been searching for. As they unloaded the boxes, she watched Alex running through the yard, exploring every corner as if it were a new world waiting to be discovered. That smile on his face made her realize that they were finally on the way to something new, something good. Inside the house, as she unpacked the boxes, Samantha felt like she was being reborn. Every piece of furniture placed in its spot, every book on the shelf, was a symbol of reconstruction. There were no more shadows of Ryan, no echoes of painful memories. It was a simple house, but here she and Alex could create new memories, free from the grip of fear. The bond between the two of them, already strong before, was now unbreakable. They had gone through the worst and emerged on the other side more united than ever. Every gesture between them, a hug, a look, showed the depth of that love. During the nights, after putting Alex to sleep, Samantha would sit on the porch, gazing at the stars. The gentle breeze brought a sense of relief, as if whispering that everything would be okay. She reflected on the journey that had brought them here, the terror, the escape, the strength she had discovered within herself. She felt a quiet pride for having been able to protect Alex, but also a humility in realizing that, even in the darkest hours, love had been the guiding light. Here, in this new town, they had the opportunity to start fresh. Alex, too, seemed to understand, in his own way, that this change was more than just physical. He was more resilient than Samantha had imagined. In a short time, he had made friends at school and found joy in the simple things. Running through the park, riding his bike through the quiet streets of the neighborhood. One afternoon, as they walked hand in hand through the park, Alex looked up at his mother and asked, "Mommy, we're happy here, aren't we?" Samantha paused for a moment, looking into her son's innocent eyes, and felt her heart warm. She smiled and answered, "Yes, we are. Very happy." There was something liberating in the simplicity of the question. That small dialogue symbolized everything they had sought and finally found. They were happy. It wasn't a happiness based on the absence of pain, but in overcoming it. Gradually, Samantha returned to doing the things she loved. She started working in a local bookstore, a quiet environment that allowed her to breathe and, at the same time, be surrounded by stories that reminded her that there are always new beginnings. At times, she found herself lost in pages of romances or adventure stories and, ironically, realized that her own life had become one of those stories, a journey full of fear, courage, and, in the end, redemption. As the months passed, the new chapter of their lives began to take shape. Alex grew more confident, and so did Samantha. They were no longer the same people who had fled that terrifying night. Now they were a mother and son who, together, had discovered the depth of love, courage, and hope. If you enjoyed Samantha and Alex's incredible story, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. If you love emotional stories and would like to support our channel in bringing more quality content, consider contributing through Buy Me a Coffee. The link is in the first pinned comment. Your help is essential for us to keep improving. Thank you for your support. See you in the next emotional story.